are planning to speak or would like to speak to sign up on the sheet over here on the table. I'll make a few comments before we continue with the agenda. First, I'm sure you're aware that today is September 11th, and that's a day that changed lives for many Americans following the catastrophes in rural Pennsylvania, at the Pentagon, at the World Trade Center, and likely affected directly families here in Friendship Heights. So let's observe, if you will, a moment of silence to remember the shock and the sadness and the fear and the anger, and also the sense of unity and other responses on that day and since as a result of what we experienced. Thank you. I want to provide an update or two. First, about Page Park. As you likely know, Page Park is still closed. We still can't provide a good estimate for its opening. That date depends on many factors, including the weather through the fall and winter. If you've heard, as several council members have, that the council is unnecessarily delaying the opening of the park, please set that belief aside. Opening the park still requires several steps to be completed after a complete application for a permit is submitted. Council will consider an amendment to our agreement with Green Sweep, the park's designer and builder, at tonight's meeting, which is meant to resolve some thorny issues and potential liabilities which have arisen because of language in the agreement approved last year by the previous council. This council still awaits submission of a complete permit application by Green Sweep to the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services. Sealed engineers' drawings are an essential part of that application. We had hoped the application would have been submitted by the close of last week. Now, unless something has changed today, we've been told it could be submitted this week. As noted at the last council meeting, that application will likely be reviewed by several county departments to assure compliance with health, safety, environmental, and other legal and regulatory requirements. A typical review process by the county, once a complete application is submitted, takes 30 to 45 days. This review process may be complicated by the fact that county permitting agencies were not able to review plans, document changes needed to the original plans, and subsequently observe construction. So this may not be a typical review. After the county review, village officials will need to review any conditions specified by the county, receive from Green Sweep an estimate of costs, if any, associated with those conditions, negotiate any costs for any changes, approve further work necessary to open the park, and await final construction and equipment to complete the park. So I would encourage those who are interested in following the progress to check the village website and newsletter for regular updates on this project, or speak with council members who are also being kept up to date. If you've perused the agenda, you'll note 3 items which will influence life for village residents. The first is a brief presentation from Atara Margulies of the County Planning Department. It's an update on the department's announced urban design study. The second are comments proposed for adoption by the council following the Maryland Department of Transportation's announcement of a study to improve pedestrian, bicyclist, and motorist safety and access to businesses along River Road. And the third is a novel pedestrian master plan proposal from the County Planning Department, which touches on improving pedestrian and bicyclist movement between the village and surrounding neighborhoods and county-wide. And you may have picked up some documentation on the table as you came in, which outlines the goals and objectives of that study and provides some additional information about the themes and activities that the County Planning Department is seeking County Council's approval for. Finally, there will be shortly an opportunity for you to address the Village Council, to have your thoughts heard and begin to be considered. It isn't meant to be a live conversation between members of the council or the council collectively and those giving testimony. As I mentioned, please sign in if you haven't already done so. If you wish to present a comment to the council this evening, I'll call those who wish to speak in the order of sign-in. I respectfully ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Village staff will manage the timer. You'll hear the first alert sound at 2.5 minutes to let you know that you have 30 seconds more to speak. At the 3-minute mark, I will ask you to end your comments. Out of respect for those attending and observing the meeting tonight, and out of respect for the remaining items on the council's agenda tonight, please end your comments at that point. Please enable all of us to hear comments from other residents who await their turn to speak. And if you have questions for a particular council member, please feel free to ask that question following the meeting's adjournment later tonight. As a reminder, many council members now have monthly office or resident hours. These dates and times for these are posted on the village website and digital boards out front. Feel free to set up appointments. I know those with office hours look forward to speaking with you, and as I have found the conversations to date useful. If you think you have comments that will run 3 minutes, longer than 3 minutes, don't despair. Simply summarize your major points within the 3-minute period tonight. You can submit written comments of any length at any time addressed to the council in handwritten or .pdf format. If you submit comments later, please include a heading with your name, address, if relevant, the date of the council meeting at which you spoke, and the topic of your comments. Address that material to Jason Goldstein if dropped off in person, or email it to info@friendshipheightsmd.gov. Please note also that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Your comments tonight will become part of the video record of the meeting. That video record is posted on the village's website. By coming forward to present your comments, you consent to the recording of them and to others' subsequent access to them on the village website. And I ask that any comments be respectful of council members and of other members in the audience. With that, let me open the meeting to see whether there is a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight. Is there such a motion? Councilwoman Durbin, thank you. Is there support? Mayor Rose, thank you very much. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We've adopted the agenda. We'll now move to comments from the public to the council. And Lenny Berliner, I have you first. Did you want to speak or just sign in? I'm sorry? I want to speak very briefly. Please come up to the microphone and speak directly into the microphone. You may need to turn it on at the base of the...
How's that? Okay. I just wanted to raise a prospect that was actually discussed during the meeting following elections of the council. And because the planning process is proceeding apace, I think that if anyone else besides me is interested in getting to know our neighbors at Geico and what their thinking is about the future, I would be happy to lead an effort to form a small committee or group to just get to know our neighbors and work with them. I know every corporation in this country has community relations and community advisory processes, and they have people engaged in them, and there's absolutely no reason not to understand them better, particularly that, you know, these processes always end up somehow taking less time than we think. Suddenly it's all upon us, and we got a reprieve, you know, and a little bit of an extension on what's going to happen with that property. But I think if we can educate ourselves and, you know, quash rumors and try to make this as positive a process as possible and make sure that the community has input to Geico, I would love to take care of that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Dawn Calabia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take this opportunity to introduce a new organization to the Village Council. It's called the West Friendship Association. It was formed in this year for the purpose of promoting the interests of residents of the original West Friendship Plat, which was developed in 1870. It's single-family home owners primarily and renters. Primary membership is open to renters and to owners who live within the boundaries. We have a website called the Friends of Willard Avenue Park. We started out concentrating just on the park, and then we realized there are lots of important issues going on in the area. The new urban design study for Friendship Heights, the safety issues, and of course, whatever Thrive 30 is going to be. So we welcome the opportunity to get to know our neighbors and our friends in the Friendship Heights, and we look forward to being able to work together on these important issues: safety, security, improving our community, and particularly protecting our park, which we think is an important resource for the whole community. Thank you very much, and I look forward. I brought some cards. If anybody would like the website address, etc., and I'll give them to the staff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much. Al Muller.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I just wanted to briefly comment on the three issues I brought to your attention, I guess, in July. The first was the suggestion that you add some trash cans to the village, and I did want to thank you. I think you actually added an additional trash can, which hadn't been suggested, and I think that placement is excellent. I would ask you to still consider, though, one of the trash cans suggested, which has not been installed, and that's one that would be on the curb closest to the Gourmet Market. There used to be one provided closer to the Gourmet Market that was taken away by the building, and there's now more trash in the curbside, not only in front of the Gourmet Market, but coming down North Park Avenue. So I would respectfully ask that you consider that. But thank you again. The trash cans that you've put out are being used. I actually noticed people putting trash in, including the famous dog poop bags. So thank you for that. The second suggestion that was brought up, and this really had strong endorsement from your advisory group, and that was to add some additional road bumps or humps or whatever they're called. There's one that was put up, as I explained before. There was originally some hope to see what happened with the snow plows, but since there wasn't any snow, there obviously was not a chance to evaluate that. I doubt that that's really needed, and there have been subsequent concerns and complaints, especially from some of the residents in the Carlton and the Elizabeth, about people not stopping at that particular edge there. It's also notable that there's a lot of children going in for the martial arts classes, and now that the Elizabeth has opened a daycare center, there are more children that are likely to be crossing there. So if you would, please evaluate that area and also any other speed bump areas. The third point that was brought up, and this was not from the advisory group, although the president of the, or chair of the advisory group, Joe Bouchera, has had a lot of input into this, and that has to do with retrofitting of the sprinklers. I still think it's very important that the council as a government do something about alerting people and not necessarily suggesting a solution, but that's going to affect every resident, whether they are tenants or condominium owners, and I sadly suspect not many residents are aware how this will affect their rents and or their condominium fees. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Mike Dorsey?
Yeah, yes, Mike Dorsey, 4620. Mr. Measy, what I have to say right now won't have any bearing on you. You weren't at the July meeting, so my comments won't reflect. I want to thank you, Mayor White, for standing up for our fine staff by calling for an end to the inappropriate and the humiliating ad nauseum discussion of personnel issues during the July council meeting. The rest of the council humiliated our fine staff at the July council meeting by discussing personnel issues that should have been handled in closed session. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and I believe in violation of the Maryland Open Meetings Act. Our staff deserves better. Now, a question to the full council, and this has to do with the Maryland Open Meetings Act. Did any of you initiate, circulate, or otherwise strategize or receive any written correspondence or emails related to personnel issues shared with 4 or more council members prior to an open meeting to vote to go into closed session in August? I believe it was 21st. If so, I'm requesting they be made available to the public. That's a question.
Thank you for your comment. Mr.
That's
Dorsey?
not a comment, that's a question.
Mr. Dorsey,
Did you engage in
it's-
sharing personnel discussion amongst council members?
Mr. Dorsey, you...
So the
your-
answer
your-
is yes.
Your 3 minutes is running. Thank you very much.
We got your answer.
Thank you.
I'll be contacting the council.
Emmanuel De Silva?
Transparency, right?
Good evening. I'm Emmanuel De Silva. I'm an agriculture and environment scientist, and I live at 4620. I would like to speak very briefly about a recycling program. Can you, next slide, please? I think we do a fabulous job in recycling. Not as good as San Francisco, which is 80%, or the state of Maine, which is 74%. The county has close to 60%. We do very well in terms of recycling paper, glass, cartons, and what have you. What we don't do a good job in recycling is our kitchen waste, sometimes referred to as organic waste. And this is where I feel we can do something about it. Next slide, please. So what I propose is a 3-bin system. This was invented in California. And you can see these are 3 bins made out of wood, each bin roughly about 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. And so you start with the first bin. When it's full, you move to the second and third. By the time it goes through the third, the materials you put in, your kitchen waste, becomes compost. Next slide, please. So what I propose is that this bin can actually be put up next to the village council office. And anyone and everyone who's interested can bring their waste from home, their kitchen waste, and put it in the bin. Perhaps we can contract out organizations, locally based organizations like the Compost Crew, to maintain it. And we can ask for volunteers. I'll be one of the first ones to volunteer to help in this process. So that is the first proposal that I have, which I think should work. The DC government is actually taking this idea forward. I teach a course on composting at the University of District of Columbia, and I see this great possibility being extended in our community. The second proposal, which some of you may prefer, is to get the condo associations to do it. I understand 2 condo associations are doing it, so if 2 can do it, why not others? I must say I've tried my luck, with my condo association, haven't gone that far, but maybe others possibly will be more successful than me. Next slide, please. So why do we need to do this? We need to do this because we are running out of space for landfills. There are 8 states in the United States that have banned food from going to landfills. I suspect Maryland will be next. The second reason is we need to do this for the climate. Composting will actually reduce emissions by 50%. If you take the food waste and convert it into compost, it will reduce emissions by almost 50%. And I would like the village to be a leader, okay, not just a follower. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Eula?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra Eula, 4701 Willard, where I've lived for about 30 years. And also, I've told some of you before, I was a planner with the Montgomery County Planning for 22 years, and I retired just a few years ago. So I just have a few quick comments. One, I wanted to tell you the landscaping out there just looks gorgeous. I walked through the neighborhood the other day, and I thought, how lucky am I to live in such a place where people have paid so much attention to our public streets. So thank you all. And secondly, I wanted to say, with regard to the agenda item today about discussing and hiring a land use attorney, as former staff, I say yay, that's a great idea. I always found that it was much easier to untie knots in certain land use issues when there was an attorney on one side for the applicant working with staff. It just went smoother, and we had 2 heads that knew all the rules and regulations and could work their way through. So I think that's a great idea, and they can also give you advice about all the land use proposals that are going to be coming up, and there'll be a lot. So, and then thirdly, about the Friendship Heights urban design study, I'm so happy that we're doing it. We have lots of public use issues that we want to sort out and create new visions for, and some of them are obvious and some of them are less obvious, like how to deal with the land surrounding Willard Towers, where I live, which strangely is owned by Somerset, and they also own land right behind Page Park, which has a conservation easement on. But a lot of that land is used by us residents of the village, so that might be a good forum in which we can sort things out that need to be done collaboratively. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you. Roger Cocchetti?
Excuse me, thanks. 2 quick comments. First, I want to commend the village staff for another milestone in technology. The fact is that you can now pay for things online. This is not particularly unusual these days, as we all know, but it is a milestone nonetheless, and it brings, I think the part that I want to commend the staff for is that they've really sort of moved the village from about 1995 to 2015 in a pretty short period of time. So there's still a lot more to do. 2 quick things I'd comment on. First, I do think that it is achievable and viable to do remote participation, not just one-way broadcast, but comments from people remotely. This happens thousands of times every day. It is more tricky than just doing a broadcast, but it is doable. And secondly, building on what the chair said, I think it enhances everybody and saves time for everybody if the council actively promotes written contributions that are posted and not edited or censored. So what happens is council members can read it whenever they have leisure, the time to do it. It's permanently there so residents can all see it, and you don't take up time with people like me standing at the podium. Second, I did want to also comment on the urban design study. It's been an important topic for me, as you may recall previous comments. The three things I'd say. And at first, if you view Friendship Heights as an Amazon warehouse for human beings, then you will view any structure that's 2 stories tall or any lawn as a waste of floor space. If you view Friendship Heights as a place where people live and you want to improve the quality of living here, then I think you take a completely different perspective. And from that perspective, I'd remind the council that of the roughly 9,000 people who live in this neighborhood, 2/3 of them are represented by you. So you're not just sort of one of many participants. You're it. You are what's here to represent our interests and improve the quality of our life. Friendship Heights needs many things. I'm very much pro-development. In my judgment, it needs a museum. It needs a playhouse. It needs a movie theater. It needs rooftop forests. It needs soundproof pickleball courts. It needs a soccer field. It needs tennis courts. It needs a lot of things. It does not need a 300-foot tall piece of concrete that adds more to our heat dome in the summer when things get hot. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Peter McGahan? Let's see. Mr. or Ms. Gang? Afsane Merfandereski?
Has this just started?
I'm
Yep.
sorry?
Just started?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Afsane Merfandereski, 4620 North Park. Good evening. I'm here tonight to make 2 requests of you, Mayor White. First, a public apology to the 5,000 residents you serve for your council's botching up of Page Park. Like the submersible that tragically imploded a few months ago in the Atlantic, multiple warnings had been issued to your council. Warning number 1, not a single one of your 3 chosen firms had a qualified landscape architect on board. Warning number 2, all 3 options transformed the natural rustic park into a man-made space with concrete and paving with no democratic choice for residents other than the 3 non-choices. Warning number 3, the large price differentials, $400,000, $800,000, and $1.5 million, instantly pointed to something being terribly off. And yet, repeated calls to not proceed, Mayor White, were not heeded. Montgomery County has cordoned off the park. Not a single permit was taken out for the $850,000 public project. However, it was your council that chose to repeatedly ignore warnings from the community, including warnings from design professionals. A formal public apology from you, Mayor White, no matter what happens, would be the right thing to do. My second request is also for a public apology, this time for the hate incident that took place 1 year ago in the village. In November 2016, Maryland's Attorney General, Brian Frosch, responded to a rise in hate crimes and hate incidents by setting up mechanisms for them to be reported to the police, including a hotline. However, in September 2022, one of your fellow council members racially abused a resident. Your council chose to cover up for your colleague, not investigate the case. Neither the victim nor the witness were ever reached out to, and despite the hate incident being filed with the police, your village council chose to not alert the community. As you know, the wrongdoer has since confessed and apologized, and yet no public statements have been issued by you, Mayor White. Friendship Heights is a diverse community. 20 to 30% of residents here are new Americans or minorities. Your choice to not go public about the incident was, number one, an offense to residents, number two, deplorably cruel to the witness and the victim, and number three, dishonored the legacy of Attorney General Brian Frosh. It would be the right thing for you to apologize to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Cameron Moody.
I'm Cameron Moody. I'm in the Elizabeth. I'm a member of the advisory committee for the Friendship Heights Alliance, and upon meeting with some of the organizers of that group, I was told that it would be nice if I could gather community feedback from the village of Friendship Heights about the public realm. They want to put a lot of effort into gathering these comments so that they can focus on issues that the community sees. As you all know, the corridor that they cover is mostly along Wisconsin Avenue, but I was hoping that maybe I could partner with village management to maybe serve as a repository for that feedback and forward it to them so that they know what our concerns are. I also wanted to take the time to give praise to Page Park, which I actually find to be very attractive. Everyone I've interacted with personally really likes Page Park and finds that it went from something that was unappealing and unusable to hopefully when the barricades come down, we can fully enjoy as a community. And I also wanted to briefly comment on the urban design study. I don't know that it's going to tremendously urbanize Friendship Heights, even though I do know that's a possibility. But I do want to remind everyone that you're either forcing yourself to get better or allowing yourself to get worse. I think we've kind of seen over the past 10 years what happens when you do nothing. And I know for me it's not very appealing. I think it's also important to remind everyone that more housing brings more people, and more people brings more businesses and services, and I think that's something we could all use. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment period. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I had signed up, maybe my name was not very readable.
Okay.
My name is Prem Garg. I'm a resident of Carlton. The question I had for the council concerns the status of the famous Red House. If I recall correctly, more than a year ago, the council in its wisdom and despite the opposition from every single speaker who took the podium had decided to spend $3 million of the taxpayers' money in buying it, and with the promises that it could be a museum, it could be a historically preserved place. But every time I go and walk by there, I see some lease sign for commercial space. So, what exactly is happening? What's the status of that building? And more importantly, what's the financial implications of that purchase to the council? Because that was, after all, well-earned money of the taxpayers. And is it just sitting idle and doing nothing? And are we spending anything on its maintenance? Or what about the opportunity cost of the money which is lying sunk there in that building? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did I miss anyone else? I don't have any other names on the sign-up sheet. Thank you all then for your comments. Let me see whether there are any comments from the council. Councilwoman.
Just like people to know, the comments given here, the emails, comments coming through the office hours, they are all very much appreciated. We don't have crystal balls. We can't read minds. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and concerns.
Thank you. Councilman Schaefer? No? Okay. No? Okay. Nothing? Okay. Mayor White? Mayor's announcements?
Beginning with tonight's meeting, the Village Council's regular monthly meetings will now start at 7 p.m. We will host a business fair event on Saturday, October 14, from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in Humphrey Park, outside the Village Center. This event will run concurrently with the farmers market at the same location. Residents are invited to come and learn more about local businesses and the products and services they offer. The next scheduled council meeting will be Monday, October 16 at 7 p.m. due to the Columbus Day holiday the week before.
Thank you. Can you repeat the time for the fair, for the business fair, please?
The business fair on Saturday, October 14 is from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in Humphrey Park.
Sure. That moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes. These include the public session minutes of the July 10th council meeting, the closed session minutes of the July 13th council meeting, and the closed session minutes of the August 21st council meeting. I'm happy to entertain a motion to adopt all of those simultaneously, if that's the motion. Otherwise, if council would prefer to adopt them individually, you can do that too.
I move for them to be adopted altogether.
Is there a support? Thank you. Is there discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. The motion to approve all of the minutes listed was supported unanimously. That moves us on to the treasurer's report, the next item. Councilman Schaefer.
Okay. All right, thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the current year's budget. So in March, when the budget was passed, the projected surplus was $133,000. That's a little less, or more than a little bit less, than we typically have had as a surplus. There's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason was the police patrol of 100. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Okay. The police patrol is a line item that did not exist in last year's budget. It's $175,000, and it's our third largest expense after salaries and the shuttle. So that took up a lot of the surplus. And they're very small items, but to respond to what somebody said, we also have two new line items, which are the maintenance of the Red House and the maintenance of Page Park, not the construction, the maintenance. And those are not significant, but I'm just mentioning them because they are new line items. So that's why the projected surplus was $133,000 based on the budget approved in March. And the reality is, based on what we know now, that surplus is mostly gone. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The first is we approved an invoice for painting and some other maintenance items in the community center. That was, I think, about $35,000. Is that right? Yeah, and I don't believe that was budgeted. The other big reason is when the budget is passed in March, there's sort of a placeholder for the salary. We estimate what the salary increases will be, and we actually don't get around to passing them and voting on them till June. In this case, it was done in July. And because the increase is passed by the council, and because it is our biggest expense, even a small increase will have a big effect on the budget, and that's what happened this year. So that is another hit taking on the budget. And then there are just, I think, some other miscellaneous items that in the aggregate may end up adding up. It's a very tight budget. We don't have a contingency item. So the reality is, and we're, you know, not far into the year, but it's likely we're going to wind up with either a very small surplus or around break even. So I just wanted to let people know that. There is a Finance Committee meeting in October. It hasn't been announced yet. It's going to be October 17th, 3 p.m. It is an open meeting. And I also am one of the people that have office hours, so if any of you have any ideas or suggestions or want to talk to me privately, I'm happy to do that. Okay, thank you.
Bob?
Yes, Councilman
Roy,
Easy.
could you comment on a few things? The possibility or indeed the probability that some of the budget items will be under budget, that is, that we'll spend less than what we had intended, and secondly, any speculation about what the tax revenue is likely to be, which we don't know exactly what that's going to be like, and
Right.
those are always estimates.
Right, I actually, and Julian helped me understand earlier, it's too early to know about our tax revenue because we have 4 months when we get big chunks. We haven't hit one of those months yet. So if you actually looked at the budget, we're way under, but it's not, it's more of a timing issue. Items under budget, there's nothing, if it doesn't snow, we'll be under, but, you know, at this point, there's nothing that is obviously going to be under budget.
But really, so I appreciate both comments. So the bottom line at this point is it's a little premature to say
Yes.
that we're going to be running a deficit or whatever.
Well, I'm not
at
saying
this
we're going to be
point.
running a deficit. What I'm saying is we do have 2 items that we're not budgeted for.
I
which we
understand.
all- Yeah. And to address that point, the council as a group, we're not going forward, we're going to have a different policy so we don't pass the budget in March and settle the salaries in June. We're going to incorporate the salary issues into the budget process. So whatever we come up in March when we pass the budget should reflect what the actual costs are.
Thank you, Councilman
Okay.
Schaefer. We have committee reports, a report from the Community Advisory Committee meetings of August 9th and September 7th. Oh, I'm sorry. Julian, Village Manager's report, thank you. No.
Three quick items to respond to Mr. Garg and the Red House. We are currently without a tenant. We had a prospective tenant for the Red House, which the tenant was very interested in setting up a bakery, but they have pulled out just recently, withdrawn their application because of financial issues. There was a price tag for renovating the kitchen that they couldn't see their way through to doing. So currently, we do not have a tenant. The for lease sign is still out there, and we're working with the broker to hopefully identify possible tenants in the near future. We also recently had a meeting with the council chairman attended, along with Jason and myself, with the county DPS, the Department of Permitting Services, to give us an update on the permits and whatever regulatory review would be required. So we have a good understanding of how that works when the time comes for a tenant. Second item is the streetlight report. We're happy to announce we have a new website feature where you can report streetlights that are out. If you happen to be walking out late at night or walking your dog, you can hop on our website if you wouldn't mind and let us know which light is out, and we'll get a report about that. Final item is ActiveNet, just to mention that we did launch the ActiveNet online class registration, and we've had some good feedback so far. A few people have had some difficulty, and we've been working with them at the front desk to make sure it goes smoothly, but so far, so good with the online registrations. Thank you.
Any questions from council members? Councilwoman Durbin?
Yes, I have a question. Are we assuming that the tenant, whoever it is going to be a food service?
that's what
tenant
we're,
for the Red House.
that's what we're looking for. So that was the result of the community survey, said that pretty clearly. So that's the intent. Yeah, preferably bakery, cafe, yes.
Any other questions? I'd just like to say, Julian, okay, Cheryl? Councilwoman
To
Tyler?
follow up behind Paula, how long do we wait if we don't get a food interest to turn down other interest? How long are we waiting?
Very, very good question. I think that would be up to the council. There's not a stated deadline. Our broker is simply out there searching until we tell her not to or to look for somebody else.
So she's searching for a tenant, not just a food tenant?
Yes.
Okay.
She's had some, a few nibbles from non-food prospective tenants that haven't resulted in anything, but yeah, she would be looking for anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So have we gotten any feedback, like things that might cause someone to just not rent it?
Well, the cost of renovating the kitchen was the major issue with this prior tenant.
Right.
And this tenant actually was okay with the house as is. We weren't sure if we would find somebody that would really want to renovate their house or have us do a lot of structural renovations, which we might not want to do because it's such an old house. So ideally, we would find somebody that is willing to take the property as is, and this tenant basically was ready to do that, but just didn't have the funding to be able to make it work.
So is there a use that it's suitable for today without much in the way of renovation?
Well, it was used as a commercially. The previous owner, without any renovation, rented the top floor, which is basically 3 bedrooms, rented it to a commercial office for commercial use for years. The ground floor has been vacant for a while. Many years ago, the ground floor was used as a food cafe, kind of sandwich shop. There were a few different things in there from a while back, but it would be, it could be usable for a restaurant, cafe, or a commercial simple office rent.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Julian, Village Manager Mansfield, I'd just like to say I did attend the meeting with you. I appreciate the fact that you kept the meeting scheduled, even though we knew that the potential tenant was no longer interested in it. And having discussed that meeting with you afterwards, I know that we both found it very helpful and informative and useful to know ahead of time what kinds of requirements might have to be met to convert that, in this case, to a food service operation. That appeared that requirements would be reasonably extensive, that several county departments would need to be talked with, that we probably either we would or our architects and engineers would have to initiate that conversation with different departments. There wasn't going to be necessarily close coordination between the Department of Permitting Services and the Health Department, for example, or WSSC, or the utility companies. And then there was very interesting conversation, just as a sort of a last detail, about if a bakery came into this building and the bakery was interested in milling its own flour as a way to attract customers, what the very strict requirements would be in order to keep that a safe operation. Not that it's not done elsewhere, but that there are special requirements, hooding and containment requirements. So thank you very much for keeping the meeting going. Councilwoman Tyler.
Listening to that, and I think that's kind of where my questions were going with asking how long do we wait, and you all attended the meeting, are we putting ourselves in a price out position that, the longer we hold on to this house, of how much are the updates? Are we putting ourselves in a position that we aren't going to find a quote, a business or a baker that wants to put that much money into it? How much is it going to cost, just on a normal level, from what you all had from your meeting? What did you learn that the outlay, is somebody going to have that kind of money to come in and retrofit that building?
Yeah, I think that becomes a conversation with the broker. I mean, the estimate for this latest tenant was $150,000 to completely overhaul the kitchen and bring it up to code and install this ventilation system that's required.
On top of the rent?
On top of the rent. Now, their proposal was to, delay the rent for about 8 months, I believe. And that never got to the council because they withdrew their offer, but their preliminary offer was for an 8-month rent abatement while they got all this work done. But it is customary, according to the broker, for the tenant to absorb those costs when they come in, the restaurant. So,
and I understand that.
Yeah, she didn't think it's impossible for somebody to come in and have the financing to do this. This particular tenant just didn't have it.
Okay.
Thank you, Village Manager Mansfield.
Thank you.
That then moves us to committee reports. The report of the Community Advisory Committee meetings of the August 9th and September 7th. Is there anyone here to report on those meetings? We do have, I think, in our packet, yeah, we have those
Joe
reports.
sent the minutes from the CAC meeting, unless
Right.
somebody.
They're in the board packet.
Yeah.
Okay. Which moves us on then to old business. And we have an update from Tara Margulies from the County Planning Department about the Friendship Heights Urban Design Study. Thanks, Ms. Margulies, for being here.
My pleasure. Let's see if I can make it so it works for me. Okay, so glad to be here again, and thanks for having me. For those who weren't here the last time I was here, my name is Tara Margulies, and I am from Montgomery Planning. I'm an architect and an urban planner by background, and I've been with the county about 4 years. We are doing an urban design study, which we've heard a few people mention tonight, and for those who aren't familiar, I'll just give a quick background. We are studying the public realm in Friendship Heights. So what that means is the streets and sidewalks, parks, plazas, and open spaces where people experience Friendship Heights as an urban area and a neighborhood. One important point that I want to just remind everyone of is that this is a study, and a study is where we're going to collect up information and make observations and talk to people and get your observations of your community. And then we're going to summarize all of that and reflect it back to the community in a report that will be publicly available. The study is not going to make any recommendations. It's not going to ask for any action by any of the various political bodies that we work with on a regular basis. It's not a plan. It's not going to have that sort of outcome, and it's not talking about development or housing. We're really focused on public realm. We don't always get this opportunity to focus this closely on sort of the part of an area that really gives it a lot of what contributes to sort of its character, its feel, its identity, how people experience it. But we're excited about it, and we've been walking around Friendship Heights a lot and taking a lot of pictures and making a lot of notes. And we're excited to sort of continue to move on that. So this study has two components. It has sort of our professional planner observations just by, walking around and noticing what's happening in Friendship Heights and looking at it with like sort of an urban design lens on, but it also has this public engagement component. And I'm happy to be here to announce that we have 2 dates that we've now secured for community engagement events that will be fully open to the public, and that means open to everybody who considers themselves interested in anything going on in Friendship Heights. So that goes beyond just residents. The first one will be on October 24th, which I believe is a Tuesday night, and it will be at the Wisconsin Place Rec Center. And on October 30th, which is the following Monday night, we will have the same event here. So we're doing the two of the same event, mostly to give people an option of which night to come, what works with their schedule, to give more people an opportunity to participate. They're going to be open house type events. So they're going to go from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m., but you don't have to come at any particular time. You can come at your leisure when it works for you. You can come for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, at the beginning, at the end. You'll have the same opportunity to participate no matter when you come. We haven't quite finished designing the events, but I can say that there'll be interactive opportunities to participate. There'll be a lot of opportunity to talk to staff, we will have questions that we will want to know. We'll be talking to people, asking questions, and there'll be things to sort of fill out and react to. But of course, we'll be happy to listen to anything people want to tell us about anything relevant to what we're doing. In addition, we're developing an online survey that will get at some of those same questions. So whether you participate in person or online, you'll have the opportunity to contribute to this and sort of address the same topics. We'll probably be releasing that online survey, I expect, in the beginning of October, so a little bit in advance of those other events, probably not too in advance, maybe a week or two in advance. And of course, the way we will communicate with everyone is through our email newsletter. Some people may have signed up and then they would have gotten an email today announcing those 2 dates, sort of like a save the date email. And if you want to be on that e-letter and you're not already, certainly Julian knows how to get on it, but I'm going to provide him with some more information about all these events to go into the village newsletter for the next month. And so then including the e-letter sign up and more details about all of these things so folks who want to participate can. We won't have the online survey ready for the village newsletter, but we'll have the e-letter. And then once you get on that, you'll get all and any important updates about the study. So that, other stuff that we'll be doing in terms of engagement, just to give everyone another we've now got some other dates that we're working on. We are hoping to sort of be and take a table at some public events happening over the course of October and November. The business fair is one of them that we were invited to participate in, and I think that'll be another great way to meet more people that we haven't met yet. We're working on getting ourselves into some other ones since they're not confirmed yet. I can't share them quite yet, but they're happening all the way into November. And of course, as we know those more, we'll include them in the e-letter. We're also going to be just, we'll be standing on street corners and walking around. And when we do those things, we usually wear our Montgomery Planning blue shirts and stuff. So we look official, so you'll recognize me and my colleagues. And we might have a table here and there out in Friendship Heights over the next month or two, mostly to just raise awareness about the study, make sure people have access to the survey and to the other engagement stuff that we're doing. So October and November are really going to be the months when we're doing a lot of this, and I look forward to seeing everybody at those events, and I hope certainly everyone comes back to the ones at the end of October that'll be in this building.
Thank you, Ms. Margulies. Are there
Sure.
questions from council members? Councilwoman Solt.
Can you,
No, no.
can you give me an idea of what you're going to be asking in this online survey?
So
have you drafted it on a preliminary basis?
We know some topics, but we haven't drafted it yet.
Okay.
Um,
Like how long, how many questions?
I don't know how long it will be yet.
The most you know that you can share.
Sure.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
So I can tell you that we will be asking questions about people's experience walking around Friendship Heights, understanding, where people go, where do they choose to walk, what's too far to walk in Friendship Heights, where would you pick a different mode, and questions about, so there'll be a bunch of questions about walking. There'll be questions about using transit, both internally. I'm very curious to hear about how people use the shuttle, and what do people use that for, and are they using it often, or using it instead of walking, or in addition to, or things like that. Also wanting to know how people are using, if you're going to Bethesda, are you using the bus, are you moving your car? There'll be some questions around those types of things. They might not be exactly those questions because I haven't drafted them yet. And we have internal review and things for stuff like that. But, off the top of my head, these are topics we've talked about. We're going to ask, and we will have park staff with us at the engagement events as well, from our partner agency, the Parks Department, that people are familiar with, because we are going to talk about parks and open spaces, because one thing we really want to understand is how they're being used. There are, half a dozen at least in Friendship Heights that are sort of used as parks, and we want to understand, where do people go? What are the ones that function well? Why do you go to the, if there are some that you frequent more often, why is that? What about those parks makes them more welcoming? And if you're not going to some, why not? What about those isn't welcoming? And some of that is just to understand what makes a successful park in Friendship Heights for this community. And because some of the times those things are different in different places, and just to understand what folks are looking for. And we'll probably ask questions like about what's not meeting your needs about some of these open spaces, and people, I'm sure, will have plenty of things to say about that. That's some of the big topics we'll be focusing on. There's probably some others that I'm not thinking of off the cuff here, but I know we've been sort of working on thinking of way of how to get at some of that information, because we want to have interactive ways to do it in person as well as online surveys, but we want to end up with the same with information that's sort of comparable, so we can, it can be helpful. We can learn something from it, summarize it back for everybody, so people will understand, what did we hear about these places, things like that.
Will you address how people go about getting groceries?
So I think one of the things we will be asking is where are destination places in Friendship Heights, and I expect that we will be hearing a lot. We're going to ask about community amenities. That's another topic. I haven't quite flushed that out as much in my mind yet, so I don't have a good idea of how we're going to ask that. But we are going to be asking about sort of community services and amenities. What is working here in terms of that you feel you have enough of, what does you not, and if you don't, how do you get there to those other places that you need to go? All of those things are all within sort of the scope of this study.
Yeah, one thing you might notice is at least there's one park in our neighborhood, that has a lot of shopping carts. I guess people might be having trouble getting their groceries back
when on
foot,
yeah.
so.
Excuse
Well,
me.
there are
Excuse
carts,
me,
yeah.
Councilwoman Salt, you have the
Yes.
floor? Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you have the floor.
Okay. You might see carts in the parks when you're looking around. So love to have insights into how to make that stop, or what's the reasoning behind it. Mhm.
Yeah, and that would certainly be something we'd be talking about. And we're coming here at lots of different times to try and get senses of different things that we see at different times, different places. And we'll continue to do that over the next few months. But of course, the residents and other stakeholders are going to have more things to tell us that we haven't seen, because we've only been doing this for a bit. You guys have been here for a long time. And that's one of the things that I think there are a lot of things we're going to learn. And details like that about public spaces are helpful in understanding, what's going on in the public spaces here and what kind of activity is happening, whether it's what people want or not, things like that. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Councilman Measy.
Tara, whenever you make these presentations, you always say that this is information gathering, basically no decisions, no recommendations or anything like that. Obviously, this has to fit into some process of recommendations or planning, or else why would we do it? So what's the process by which what you're doing here or proposing to do fits into some planning actions that would actually take place?
So a lot of times a study is added to the work program, excuse me. With the idea that a little bit of exploration might then prompt people to say, okay, they observed X and Y. Is there an action that needs to come out of that? What would that action be? The study isn't going to recommend a particular course of action, because what we usually do with studies is summarize what those findings represent. So if we're studying either an economic trend, for example, or a development trend, or a particular area or development challenge, we are going to present sort of strengths and weaknesses. I mean, I think as we all agree on them in terms of what we hear from stakeholders, we will be asking those types of questions, as I just was responding, like what's working, here and what isn't working here with regard to these topics. We will be presenting that as, stakeholders are generally supportive of X. They think this is a great park, but this isn't working because X and Y. We're going to stop short because it's a study and it's not subject to the kind of formal review that a plan is, just by saying, therefore we should do X. But a lot of times if you bring the strengths and weaknesses to the fore, then the next action becomes more obvious after that's complete. And I think there's been a lot of discussion about what the next action should be, and we're hoping that this study will help advance that discussion, but I don't know where we'll be when we get to the end of that. But in theory,
it's just one, so
Sure.
the study, you finish the study, have strengths, weaknesses, or the whole business, and that goes where?
so we present it to the planning board.
The planning board.
Right,
That's-
and usually, sometimes that will result in a discussion about, well, what do we do with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a planning board, and then sometimes a council's conversation about what next planning action might, or study, or another thing that we would do after take
That's
place.
fine.
And that's sort of where how studies usually do. Sometimes that subsequent work is not immediate. Sometimes it's a few years out. I mean, it depends on how every situation is so different. But most of the studies we've completed have in the end informed future work, although it may not have been immediately. It may have been 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But of course, in public sector planning, that's a short time. So.
Councilman Schaefer.
So to circle back to the comment someone had earlier, how might your study affect what eventually happens on the Geico site?
So actually, this study won't affect, not in a direct way, what happens on the Geico site.
In an indirect way?
That's hard to say. I mean, we're not, we are hopefully, I hope people who are, I mean, we've reached out to Geico to let them know we're doing this study. We hope that they will spread the word to their employees because we certainly consider them stakeholders. In Friendship Heights as well, people who are commuting in count as stakeholders, right? They spend the day here. I'd be curious to know if they're spending any more time in Friendship Heights or they're just coming and going. I mean, those are the sort of things that contribute to an urban area, whether the people who come here for their day job actually stay and shop and eat and things like that. We're interested in those kinds of patterns. But this isn't looking at future, this is identifying how things are functioning now. I'm also curious, and this is something I'm sure I will be asking folks, I'm curious to know if people in Friendship Heights use the massive lawn at Geico or not, since it seems to be like just a lawn. And, there's a lot of those kind of spaces here, and I think we're going to ask about those. I don't have any preconceived notion about it right now. I'm just curious how it's functioning in this place.
Any other questions? Ms. Margulies, thanks very much for coming and giving us a briefing about the urban design study, and look forward to the meetings in this building and elsewhere and seeing you at the fair and on street corners.
Great.
Thanks.
I hope to see everyone at the end of October. Thank you.
The last item under old business is addresses the material that is behind tab 6, which is the addendum to the contract with Green Sweep. And the background to this is that a negotiating team was appointed by the council to consider the language for an addendum. The negotiating team was comprised of the mayor, the village manager, the village attorney, and myself. And it's our recommendation that the council adopt the amendment that is in the packet. And for the purpose of discussion, I'd seek a motion to do that. So moved by Councilman Measy. Is there support? Okay. Support by Councilwoman Tyler. This is a packet that the council has in front of it. Yep. So is there discussion about the addendum to the contract? Yeah, the motion was to adopt the addendum to the contract. Right. Are there questions?
Can we know what you're talking about? Yeah. Can we know what you're talking about? We're sitting out here and you're talking about an addendum?
Yeah, we are talking.
I'm not reading it.
Excuse me, thank you. Is there discussion? Council?
Yeah, do you want to give a summary of it?
I can give a summary of it if you'd like. Sure. This is an addendum to the original contract, as I mentioned, with Green Sweep, which was adopted by the past council. This amendment or addendum to the contract would change first the payment structure, which would replace the original, which was 33% of the total amount due upon signing, 33 1/3% due at 66% completion of the project, and would replace or substitute or include additional language which would say that a progress payment would be made to Green Sweep subject to the terms and conditions that are set forth in the addendum that we're discussing tonight. And in addition, it contains information that says that the first 2 payments have been made, that an invoice which has been submitted in the amount of $7,280 for engineering analysis would be part of the reimbursement, that the progress payment, which is being added, is $92,720, and that $92,720 of the remaining $283,853 does not increase the compensation due to the contractor. In addition, following that, there are conditions placed on the, in the amendment. They have to do with the contractor accepting, meeting applicable laws, and being responsive to any conditions and requirements that are imposed by the County Department of Permitting Services, and that if the contractor contends that the work is outside the scope of the project, elements that are in the original agreement, that those would be described to council as part of the council's normal order of business, that there'd be no guarantee of approval for those, and that no change order request, which is language from the original agreement, would be would need to be prefaced by an explanation of any terms or conditions imposed by the county, and the subsequent submission of a change order to the village manager detailing that additional work. The amendment also says that the contractor will cooperate with the county permit review process, including providing the county with any additional documentation requested without any additional request for payment, and that the compensation due under the agreement remains a flat fee, doesn't authorize any additional hourly billing, and any change order that is subsequently submitted by Green Sweep would have to be approved by the village. So those represent a summary of the terms of the amendment to the current agreement. Are there any questions? So we have a motion on the table. We have support for the motion to adopt the addendum to the contract. Let me see if there's discussion. Anybody? Councilman Schaefer.
Okay. So in July, Green Sweep was here and they answered our questions. They said at the time they expected to file the permit in about a month, which would have been mid-August. And based on that, we authorized a prepayment. The council did a $50,000. I didn't vote for it. I understand the logic, why some people wanted to make a prepayment, but we're here now 2 months later. We still don't have a permit. Green Sweep's not here, and I don't understand the logic for increasing the amount from what was proposed 2 months ago. I just don't understand how we justify even more than we were willing to pay. And the other comment I want to make is I think some people on the council assume that the permit review is a formality, and it's not. We have no documentation from Montgomery County that says we're getting a expedited review or a streamlined review. We have no idea what they'll come back with in terms of delays with time, in terms of additional cost. And remember that Green Sweep did all of this work under the assumption that nothing they did was going to get reviewed. So that's the elephant in the room. We have no idea what the county is going to come back with. And I think at this point it's just premature to authorize any prepayment that we're not supposed to pay under the contract until the park's complete, to advance it to them in the absence of any feedback on what they've done.
Thank you, Councilman Schaefer. Are there other comments? Councilman Tyler.
My understanding is we're not, I guess it's terminology, because I was the one at last meeting who suggested, just to get everyone at the table to talk, is to move the money that, and 50,000 was one, I would have gone higher, but 50,000 was just to get people to talk, to get this moving forward. So where we are now, we're not overpaying them or prepaying them for work. We're paying them, from my understanding, is that we're still in following the guidelines of what was written in the contract prior to us, to this council.
The contract called for the final payment, the final third, to be paid when the park was complete. And I don't believe that we've met that burden, or they've met that burden. So
And
it
this
is,
isn't a final payment.
but it's in advance
Thanks,
of what we're.
Councilman Schaefer. Let me
Okay.
recognize people to speak rather than having a back and forth way. Our Councilwoman Tyler, anything else that you wanted to share? Are there other, Councilman Mazie?
I don't think anybody in this room is more frustrated with green sweep than I am, and how long this whole process has taken. At the same time, I agree with Roy that what the original contract said. On the other hand, everybody also agrees that the work on the park is 90% finished, or 85, 90%, pick a number like that, and we've paid about 60% of that at this point. So we are making a payment, in essence, for the work that's been done, or at least a part of the work that's been done. We're still holding back nearly $200,000 as a contingency against them not finishing the job. And I think that balances our equities with their equities in this situation. Again, I hate it that we're at this point, but I think that's where we are. I think our negotiating committee, in consultation with our attorney, has come up with something quite reasonable here for us to support, and I think we should do that.
Thank you, Councilman Mazie. Are there other comments from other council members who haven't spoken yet? Okay, Councilman Schaefer.
So I don't agree with the premise that we all agree the work's 90% done. It may be, we just simply don't know at this point. Until the work is expected and signed off on, we have no way of knowing, because things may have to be moved, undone, rebuilt. So my point is, it's premature to say we're 90% finished. If we were, I would support an advance payment, but I just don't think we're there yet.
Are there other comments from council members? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor, which is to adopt the addendum to the contract. I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see 4. Those opposed, please raise your hand. I see 2. The motion passes 4-2. No. The addendum to the contract is adopted. That will move us, there's no need for me to vote on it, thank you. That moves us into, excuse me. 4-2, right? And abstention, yeah. I am abstaining, right. The first item under new business is discussion of the Montgomery County Pedestrian Master Plan. Me actually, as the chairperson, typically I would not vote on a motion that's before the committee based on Robert's Rules of Order. I can vote on a motion that's before. I can vote to move it forward to adoption. I can vote to prevent it from going forward. But Roberts is quite clear about the role that I should play. So that is why I did not vote tonight. My vote was irrelevant to the outcome. Moves us to the discussion of the County Pedestrian Master Plan. The information about this is in the packet, and in addition, there's material that is on the table over to the right side that some members of the audience and I think council may have been given this too. I'll make some opening comments about this. I learned about the pedestrian master plan earlier this year as it was being discussed by the county planning department, and then subsequently as the pedestrian master plan was beginning to be presented to the county council. And my reflections on that plan were that it's an extraordinary plan. It focuses on the pedestrian experience in Montgomery County. We're a county that's been heavily planned around cars, and little attention has been given other than on the side to the pedestrian and the bicyclist experience. And so I've taken the time to look through that plan, and I noticed as I reviewed it that there are 2 points where the village itself is discussed. And after reviewing the plan, I wrote some suggested comments, and this is a request to have the village support those comments and refer them to the county council, which is now considering the referral from the planning department. What I've said in the recommendations is that I'd hope that the priority of recommendations addressing the pedestrian experience, specifically in Friendship Heights, would be elevated, that a trail creating a full pedestrian shortcut from Sherrill, Baltimore, and Saratoga Avenues to the Willard Avenue path, enabling better access between Western Avenue, Brookdale, and Willard Avenue neighborhood parks and River Road would be helpful, that adopting the Willard Avenue path as a future bike path would be useful, that establishing a safe pedestrian crossing across Willard Avenue to improve access to Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park between North Park Avenue and the traffic light at River Road, that using a road diet to narrow Willard Avenue, slowing traffic from North Park Avenue to River Road, would mean that drivers would be more likely to meet the posted speed limits, that planting trees along Willard Avenue and widening the sidewalk west of North Park Avenue would improve the pedestrian experience, that creating bicycle side paths from Western Avenue at River Road to Little Falls Parkway would make bicycling safer, that collaborating with the Maryland Department of Transportation to establish a regular maintenance schedule for the right-of-way on River Road, particularly from Willard Avenue Neighborhood Park to 5001 River Road, because this stretch contains a bus stop that's used by village residents and others, and it has been the case that that bus stop has been almost inaccessible to people with physical challenges, and it's dangerous, has been dangerous for pedestrians to walk by that because of the narrowing of the sidewalk. It also asks that they consider speed and stop sign cameras at the intersection at North Park Avenue, Shoemaker Lane, and Friendship Boulevard with Willard Road. As we've heard tonight and heard at other times, drivers know they should stop at stop signs and yield to pedestrians, but they don't. They turn into and out of Willard Avenue in front of, behind pedestrians, and they do not yield in those crosswalks. And lastly, to coordinate the pedestrian master plan with the bicycle master plan, and ask that downtown Friendship Heights, which is also referenced in the plan, be made a Tier 1 bicycle and pedestrian priority area to improve the experiences. So we won't be taking comments from the audience. This is a discussion among the council at this point. And let me see whether there's a motion for the purpose of discussion, a motion and support to discuss this tonight. Is there such a motion?
I move to adopt the comments and discuss.
Councilwoman Salt, thank you. Is there support? Councilman Schaefer, thank you. So we have the motion, a motion to adopt these comments. We have second for that. Let me open it up to council members to discuss the proposed comments. Councilwoman Durbin.
What is the incentive for these recommendations to be adopted? Presumably that's why we're proposing.
The incentive is to speak to the county council.
No, what is the incentive for the county to adopt them?
To adopt the pedestrian master plan?
To adopt our recommendations.
The county has no way of knowing what we think unless we tell them what we think as a village.
I understand that.
And the only way that we can tell them what we think as a village is to adopt these comments or the amended comments as a council.
I understand that. I guess I'm looking beyond that to what use is it to give this to them?
So that they understand what we think about the draft pedestrian master plan, and that it has been the experience, and I suggest it will continue to be the experience, that without comments from people across Montgomery County, the council has no way of knowing what people think about that pedestrian master plan. Will they accept all these recommendations? I don't know what they will do, but if we don't tell them what we think, there's no chance that they will.
I understand that. I'm just asking why they would adopt them. I know we want to present them, but
They would adopt them. The county council would adopt the draft master plan from the planning department. And the county council is reviewing that draft plan from the county planning department. So the purpose is to insert these comments.
refine what they're doing?
I'm sorry?
The purpose is to refine what they're doing?
Yes, to emphasize what they're doing, to give emphasis to certain aspects of the plan that specifically address the pedestrian bicyclist experience in Friendship Heights.
Thank you.
People in Friendship Heights. Thank you. Councilwoman Tyler.
I'm glad your highlighted comments on particular roads, especially for those entry points to Willard. And hopefully, along with their study and along with the urban planner study of looking at modes of transportation and how people get around in the village, maybe they will pay attention, because that one strip, which is Willard Avenue, belongs to Montgomery County. They won't know how much we duck and dodge across the street. And I think it's important to bring that to light. River and Willard is a very dangerous road. Just the whole Willard Avenue is just a dangerous zone. I mean, I almost got hit with cars. It literally screeched to stop in that I was in the crosswalk. They don't pay attention to the people in the crosswalk. You really do have to look at them, and then they may slow down. So I think it's good. It's a start, and I think expressing what happens in Friendship Heights is good.
Thank you. Councilman Macy?
Yeah. Oops. It's on. I certainly am in favor of keeping pedestrians safer in the village. And there are some, as I work through this extremely long document, there are some very laudable things to it. I've become concerned, however, as I watch these things play out in downtown Bethesda, on Connecticut Avenue, in D.C., about sort of a hope that one can unilaterally repeal the car culture that we are committed to. Certainly, we all like to walk, but I think there are probably more people driving than walking. And some of the proposals that I saw in the document are not things that drivers would be particularly happy about. A road diet on Willard Avenue, well, what does that exactly mean? They tried the road diet on Little Falls Parkway, created a stretch of road which is single lane in each direction, which seems to be much more hazardous for driving than the original 2 lanes in each direction. I'm not sure how happy everybody is going down Little Falls to Massachusetts and hitting those 3 speed bumps there, where nobody actually walks, so I'm not sure what they were put there for. Except to knock the transmission, the chassis off of people's cars. Even here on North Park, having speed bumps at various places. Again, I know that people careen down North Park, but the speed bumps may not be the best thing for dealing with those sorts of things. Bike lanes are, again, my bike riding days are over. I don't think they ever really began, but I'm not biking, and I think most residents of our village aren't biking. And bike lanes, at least from my perspective in downtown Bethesda, have created huge traffic problems by cutting off lots of places for cars to go, lots of parking, and nobody's using the bike lanes. And as we narrow roads to create bike lanes, we're going to have empty bike lanes, and we're going to have fewer places to park cars, and and it's going to be more difficult to get around by cars. What I'm suggesting more than anything else is, rather than this endorsement, and I think, I want to be clear, Bobby's done a lot of work here, and he's had the stamina to go through, how much is it, 250-page proposal, which we don't have in print form, so I'm trying to read it online and doing all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff there. And I think it might be worth getting some community input here in Friendship Heights about how residents feel about all of this, and looking more closely at this very complicated plan, and see what areas we can support, what areas might our constituents might feel less likely to support. It's a big step, and I think it's something that deserves perhaps more discussion. We could have a special meeting in which we could actually look at the maps that they have, where we can see where these cut-throughs are, where these bike lanes are supposed to be, what traffic calming devices are people going to be using, and then get some community input about what position they'd like our council to take on this. But at this point, I think it's premature for the council itself to endorse this work.
Thank you, Councilman Measy. Are there other comments from members of the council? Mayor White.
Is there a deadline for our submission of comments to the county?
There will be another county council meeting sometime in the future on this. There was a meeting today, a meeting of one of the committees, I believe, of the council, but there will be a subsequent meeting.
But we would have time as a community to meet and discuss these proposals?
If the council chose to do that.
Okay.
Are there other comments? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor to support the recommendation to adopt these comments and submit them to the county council on the pedestrian master plan. I'll call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see 3. All those opposed, please raise your hand. I see 3. I will vote on this, and I'm going to vote in favor of it. The motion to adopt these comments passes. Thank you. That moves us on to excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me, Mr. Dorsey. Excuse me. Thank you. Please take your seat. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the Maryland Department of Transportation River Road Corridor Safety Study. There is some background material on this in the under the same tab. The Maryland Department of Transportation, partially in response to a death on River Road of a bicyclist this past spring, convened a meeting and a walk along River Road. And that has led to the State Department of Highway Transportation initiating a safety study along River Road from Springfield Drive to Little Falls Parkway in Montgomery County. And the purpose of the study is to improve pedestrian and bicyclist safety along about 4,000 linear feet of River Road. And that includes multiple driveways and 9 intersections. And the study is expected to be completed in the summer of 2023. And at the end of this month, September 21st, 2023, there will be a virtual meeting from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And the public can participate in the virtual meeting. And details of that meeting are available at the State Highway Administration website or by calling 433-409-5455 855-228 by phone. Village residents experience their lives both within and outside the jurisdictional boundaries of the village itself, and that experience is influenced by the design of roadways, sidewalks, and other paths within and outside the village. River Road is a major and important and useful but dangerous and unpleasant thoroughfare for those who walk it or bicycle along it, particularly along portions that the State Highway Department is not considering. And efforts to try and address its redesign and safety are important to village residents who walk and bicycle along it. So this is a recommendation to adopt several comments and to forward, and recommendations, and forward them to appropriate individuals at the Maryland Department of Transportation, the County Council, and the State Legislature. And the first is to amend the boundaries of the study. So its southeastern terminus is Western Avenue, not Little Falls Parkway, because if one has walked, if one has been along that stretch between Western Avenue and Little Falls Parkway, you'll know that bicyclists are on sidewalks and there is no effective bike lane there. Secondly, it's to perform regular maintenance, cutting weeds and invasive shrubbery along the right-of-way from 4925 to 5001 River Road on the north side of River Road. As I mentioned earlier, overgrowth narrows that sidewalk, placing pedestrians too close to traffic in the right-hand lanes, and also makes that stretch of the sidewalk dangerous and almost inaccessible for people with physical challenges. The third recommendation is to change the alignment of the pedestrian crossing from American Plant to Whole Foods Shopping Center. The recommendation that should be orthogonal or kind of at a right angle rather than diagonal as it is right now, because it's currently awkward for pedestrians to use. And it ends next to the driveway at American Plant, which is dangerous. Fourth, it's to better design the crossing under the Capitol Crescent Trail. Those of you who have walked or biked along River Road or over, taking the overpass over River Road, know that there's actually a crosswalk directly under that overpass. And the recommendation is to make it more visible to motorists, perhaps add a traffic light, the current situation where it's assumed that motor vehicles will yield the right-of-way to pedestrians who are in that walkway, places pedestrians in a dangerous situation. Fifth is to regularly clear trees and trash from the conduit on the north side of River Road where Little Falls Willard Branch Creek passes under River Road. Those of you who walked in Willard Park and walked along River Road and looked into the creek will notice that the conduit which carries the creek from one side of River Road to the other on the upstream side is, for a number of reasons, beginning to fill with trees and branches and garbage. That accumulation is beginning to obstruct the flow, which in heavy rains with climate change or other circumstances presents a situation where there may be overflow and flooding of River Road. And finally, it's a recommendation to reprogram the signal sequence for cars exiting Green Acres subdivision onto westbound River Road. Those of you who have come down Willard Avenue in a car and have the right turn light and then a right turn signal have probably experienced that people coming out of the Green Acres subdivision have a green light and appear to have a right-of-way to turn into River Road going westbound. And that creates a dangerous situation because the cars coming out of Green Acres are forcing their way onto River Road, which is not expected by those who are trying to make a right turn onto River Road from Willard Avenue. So this is a set of recommendations, again, to the Maryland Department of Transportation. It is a suggestion of things that they could consider as they consider their safety study along River Road. And the purpose of these recommendations is to try and improve the experience of pedestrians and bicyclists, and frankly, of those who are drivers on the road as well. So is there a motion to support these recommendations? Councilwoman Sol, thank you very much. Is there a recommendation to support that motion? Councilwoman Durbin, thank you very much. We have a motion and support to adopt these recommendations. Is there discussion?
I have a couple of
Yes.
questions. I have two
Councilwoman
questions. One, are you aware, or, and not as a question to you, but are there any studies, have there been any studies by Montgomery County's traffic to know how much overflow off of River filtrates on Willard Avenue over a given time? I know when there's construction, because we went through it just recently with the construction from Green Acres all the way up to Western. I know a lot more cars started coming through Willard. But do you know if there have ever been any official studies of how much Willard is used as a throughput when River is backed up?
I don't know that. I suspect that it would either be county planning might have done those studies, or the Maryland Department of Transportation might have done them, because River Road is a state route.
State route. The other part of my question was also is, I think back there was a study or a request from Somerset that came to us to support them on something with Arlington Road, Little Falls Parkway. Are they a part of this study also?
They would have, I suspect, the same opportunity to comment on this proposed study as we might have, as we do have to comment on it. In fact, the study is open to anybody to comment on at this point. Mayor White?
I had a recommendation, and I think it would loop into your number 6 with the reprogramming the signal sequence. And I think this is a relatively new change. When the shuttle bus, I ride the shuttle bus a couple of times a week, when it comes down River Road, making a left-hand turn onto Willard, right now it's a flashing red signal, and it's quite dangerous for that shuttle bus to try to make a left-hand turn, because there's very rarely a break in the traffic that is coming toward the shuttle bus on River. And I think that's a change within the last couple of months. I thought previously it was just a red light, and now it's a flashing red light, and it makes it really tough on the drivers.
Thank you. Mayor White, would you like to make that a motion to amend
Yes.
these recommendations?
Yes.
So Mayor White has proposed a recommendation to create a left turn
To make the
left turn
signal a solid red,
Okay.
green, or a left turn signal. I can't remember if it was just a red light or a solid,
If I can.
whether it was a green
Okay.
left turn signal, yeah.
Let's get clarification then.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I mean, I drive that road a lot, and it is a green light, but lately, it has become a flashing red.
Yeah.
And it is extremely difficult to make a left turn. I mean, you take your life into it when you make a left turn, because they're coming down that hill, depending on the time of day. So I would agree if they can fix that light somehow to last longer in green and not do the flashing red.
So Mayor White, your motion, yes, I'm trying to clarify what the language would be. And what I understand is you're recommending, I think, that the left turn signal onto Willard Avenue from River Road at Willard Avenue be, the green signal be extended with
Clarification
from River to Willard.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. Be extended, and the red lights be oncoming River Road traffic going west would have a red light.
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask the secretary whether that's clear.
No.
Okay. So what we're talking about is,
I know what we're talking about.
I know.
It's the words.
So I think the words, Mayor White, do you want to, would you like to restate the motion? Otherwise, I can help you with
I
it.
would propose that they eliminate the flashing red light and give traffic that is turning left onto Willard. A green turn signal.
Solid, yes.
Okay.
Clarification, do you want an arrow, green? It's got to be a green arrow, because green is coming both ways.
All right.
You mean green arrow, right?
A green arrow would be great, yeah.
So this is how I understand the motion. Mayor White, please correct me if I'm wrong. It's to eliminate the flashing red turning left onto Willard Avenue from Willard Road and create a solid green arrow there and a red light for oncoming traffic proceeding west on River Road. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. Is there support for that motion? Councilwoman Tyler, thank you. Is there other discussion about this?
I have a question.
Sure. Councilman Measy and
Melanie, has the CCCFH talked about this, the River Road thing?
We have not had a CCCFH meeting since.
You just turned it off.
We have not had a CCCFH meeting since July, and I have not seen the agenda yet for September, but I anticipate that they will.
Councilwoman Durbin, did you have a question? No? Okay. Councilwoman Salt.
Number 6, the last sentence, presently cars exiting from the subdivision, that's Green Acres, do not yield to drivers turning right from Willard Avenue onto River Road and instead force their way onto the westbound River Road. As someone who lived in that neighborhood for 30 years, the forcing language, I'm not suggesting you change it, but there is no other way to get out. So I wouldn't actually say force, but I'm subtly complaining about it. It makes it sound like you're doing something wrong and you're doing the only way you can get out is to get onto that.
So perhaps an amendment to this might be to program the light exiting Green Acres subdivision to have a green arrow. But to have red lights.
The other way.
And to have red lights for other vehicles. Thank you. Do I understand, Councilwoman Salt, that's an amendment?
I think so.
Is there support for that amendment? Councilwoman Durbin?
You're
moving that.
I'm moving it.
I'm looking to see whether there's support for that amendment. Is there support? Yeah, okay. So, yes, I'm going to repeat that. Is there any other discussion? Did you have a comment, Councilman Measy? Okay. So the way the motion would read right now is, as it stands, with 2 amendments. The first is the one for a River Road left turn onto Willard with the green signal extended, eliminating the flashing red turning left onto Willard Avenue and creating a solid green arrow and a red light for oncoming traffic moving west on River Road. And the second is to program the light at that same intersection for those turning left out of Green Acres subdivision onto Willard Road to have a green arrow and to have red lights for vehicles traveling in other directions. Okay. So there's been a motion and support then for that amended original motion. Are there any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye. We're voting on the amended motion. Right. We can move through them. I'd be happy to move through them. So on the last amendment, which is to program the light entering Willard Avenue from Green Acres. All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand. Thank you. Unanimous.
I'm sorry, it's River Road from Green Acres,
It's-
not Willard Avenue.
Yes, it's exiting Green Acres onto Willard Road. Thank you very much. Okay. The Second Amendment was to program let me make sure everyone understands, as well as me, the First Amendment. The First Amendment that I thought I was repeating was River Road left turn onto Willard Avenue, right? So that was the motion and that was support. Okay, and that passed. The second one is to program the light for those exiting Green Acres so that there is a dedicated left turn signal there. There's been a motion and support for that. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. We now have the original motion amended with those two amendments to it. Any further discussion? If not, a call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. The motion carries. Thank you very much. That takes us to a discussion on a community survey on village quality of life.
Bobby,
Yes.
before you move on,
Yes.
just a question on the two county issues that we've taken a position on. How will our position be transmitted to the county council or whoever, the planners, whoever receives this?
We will ask the village manager to make that communication.
The village manager will, and we will, the council will see the document that we send.
Village Manager Mansfield, any problem with sharing that with council before it's sent?
No, not at all. Well, but I'll find out the format, whether it is the county council or planning board or, the appropriate entity to receive it, and then we'll draft something based on the chairman's memo with the amendments.
So Julian, you'll draft it and we will all see a
And
copy.
I'll circulate it to the council before it goes out.
Thank you.
Find out when the record closes.
That moves us on to the community survey on village quality of life. This proposal is in the packet as well. It's my understanding that the previous council and the village staff had talked about gaining more information from residents of the village of Friendship Heights about the quality of life here. And as we've discovered, certainly over the last few months, there are many differences of opinion about what people think about life in the village. And it would be useful to have professional, objective, to the extent it can be, representative information to supplement the anecdotal or experiential information that one or more council members presently have available from personal observation, the census, the current county website, or the county planning department's urban design study. And the purpose of the quality of life survey would be to raise shared awareness among council members, to provide some baseline information to inform council decision-making and priority setting, and to raise residents' awareness about each other's concerns, interests, and priorities. What's proposed here is to complete one or more parts of the survey in time to inform the council's decisions about their 2024 and 2025 budget, which I would expect has been the case in the past, will occur sometime starting in the early winter and move through the January through March period. It's a proposal here to consider it initially a $2,000 expenditure for this, if it would be necessary, and to have the council involve one or more of the council's committees, Community Advisory Committee or Program Advisory Committee or Subsequent Development Committee. Having talked with the chairman of the Community Advisory Committee, I believe that there is some interest on the Community Advisory Committee and the chairman in assisting with this process. That process might involve reviewing material that has been developed and helping to assure that a larger number of community residents participate in this survey. The other possibility is that the council could appoint an ad hoc committee to advise council about the survey. If an ad hoc committee is created, talks about the potential components for such a committee. The committee would report its recommendations to the village council at its November meeting for its review, amendment, or approval prior to the survey being fielded during, if possible, no later than the November-December period. I did have some conversations in order to provide some additional resources for this work with a faculty member and subsequently a faculty member and a doctoral student at the George Washington University's Trachtenberg School of Public Policy and Public Administration. And they've expressed an interest in assisting the village with this, particularly with the design of the survey, the fielding of the survey, and its analysis. And as I discussed this with the chairman of the Community Advisory Committee, he's also indicated that he has professional experience in one or more of these areas. The village presently has a contract for the use of Qualtrics software, which could support the fielding and analysis of the survey. And based upon preliminary conversations with the assistant village manager, who's the expert with this software, it seems possible to use the software for this. And as I mentioned, I was informed that a survey of this type had already been considered by village staff, and there's interest, at least in the member of the village staff that I talk with, in having information of this nature. Attached to the memo that I've forwarded is a mock-up, a very preliminary draft of what such a village quality of life survey might look like. It's by no means complete. It needs the feedback from certainly members of the village council who might be interested in themselves understanding some of the issues that are discussed in here. Among the topics that could be considered are safety and security, transportation and mobility, awareness and satisfaction with village government process, programs, and services, inclusivity and engagement, retail shopping and access to it, affordability of housing, rent, utilities, food, and other necessities, and access to parks, recreation, arts, and culture. I also had conversation with staff at the county planning department who have responsibility for the urban design study to find out whether in fact they would include this material in their urban design. And what they told me is they don't have an interest in many of these areas. They're not willing to provide staff to support this initiative for us, and their recommendation is that the urban design study will not overlap with this study. And they suggest that if this is something that the council is interested in, that the council proceed. In addition, if the council votes to proceed with the survey, I'd ask council members to submit revisions to questions or add additional questions, policy areas that might like to be explored to allow the work to move forward in an expeditious manner so council members can get their own questions answered, and a preliminary draft might be provided to one or more of the council's committees for their comments as well. So if there is interest in this quality of life survey, then I'd seek a motion to support that, moving forward with it, and a second for it.
I move to authorize a quality of life survey understanding that that's just a mock-up and not what we're really going to do.
Right.
Mhm.
Thank you, Councilwoman Salt. Is there support for that? Mayor White, thank you very much. There's been a motion and support for a quality of life survey to be conducted. And let me see if there's discussion about that on the part of council. Councilman Easy.
Well, a question and comment. What's the $2,000 for?
The $2,000 potentially could be for materials that might have to be printed up that aren't otherwise in the budget. They could be to provide transportation for a doctoral student to visit Friendship Heights, so that the cost of coming to Friendship Heights would not be borne by her personally. And then it's a placeholder for what might arise, so that some funding is there for it.
And the GW people would be at no charge?
At no charge.
Okay. My suggestion, I have suggestions that we don't need another committee, that we have the Community Advisory Committee. The Community Advisory Committee did very good work on the questionnaire in regard to the Red House. It represents the community in that way. We're going to add some people to it, I guess. And I think that, and obviously the Community Advisory Committee meetings are open to the public, so anybody in the village who has comments on this can attend those meetings and provide input. So my suggestion is it be referred to the Community Advisory Committee.
Thank you. Would you like to make that part of the motion?
Yep, make it part of the motion. I'll let you compose it.
Okay, it's really to refer the materials that are developed by council to the Community Advisory Committee. I see that as an amendment. Is there support for that? Sure. Okay, Councilwoman Tyler, is there any further discussion? Mayor White, and then Councilwoman Durbin.
I think I would let the Community Advisory Committee take the first stab at going over the questions, because I think they have certainly a broad outlook on the community as a whole. I don't think I would involve program advisory, because they're really tasked with recommendations on specific programs in the center. They don't have that broad scope that CAC does. The last time, the last survey that Michael referenced, CAC came up with a list of questions. I took it, refined some of them. I think they took another look at it, and the council moved forward with it. I think another alternative is to have the Communications Committee take a look at it after the CAC has gotten involved. I think we should also seriously consider, I hate the term bribe, to get people to fill out the survey. It's a well-known marketing technique among village governments, that if you want a survey completed, you have to offer some type of reward. So certainly out of that $2,000, we could come up with some gift certificates to village restaurants is usually what we do. I think the length that you have here is great. I think that wouldn't be too onerous to fill out. But I think, and I hope the CAC would take a close look at the categories of questions. You have some on the newsletter. I don't think that's the best use of a quality of life survey. I think that's more related to programming and communications. I don't think a newsletter has the impact of quality of life as some other issues do.
Are there other comments? Councilwoman Salt?
One comment is confusion on the motion. And I don't want the answer now, it's because I have other comments. Does our motion on the quality of life survey include authorization of the $2,000, or is that a separate motion? And then is there a separate motion on the ad hoc committee? That can be, I guess, addressed. I agree with many of the comments made by my colleagues about there should be lots of input on this from various committees and people. So I don't know if that specifically needs to be in our motion or our approval, as long as we have the intention and goodwill to, you know, allow input from lots of entities, lots of committees. In a past life, I used to work for a survey company, and I, you know, constructed surveys. And let me tell you, it is a real skill, and it's a craft, and I think you get much better results with very well-constructed surveys. I think an ad hoc committee can help us get there more than just loose comments, valid comments, but comments that have to be worked on to actualize into a survey. So those are my thoughts. I think it's great, and I think our communications committee will have questions, or may have questions to add, but I guess I'd like a little guidance on how sort of the tiering of these decisions here.
Okay. Other, Councilwoman Durbin?
I just wondered, I can't remember when our last survey was.
It was the Red House.
Oh, I'm sorry, there was something though, was there something similar to this?
It was the Red House survey where we asked residents.
I'm not thinking of that.
That was the most recent one that
Okay.
this company used.
But wasn't there one more similar to this about the satisfaction of living in? No, we've never had anything on that?
I actually asked, excuse me. I actually asked Anne about whether there were previous surveys that had been conducted, and she said there were some previous one, at least one that had been conducted, and she was looking for, among her files, a draft of something that had been done in the past, particularly about programs, is what I understood.
I think it was on programming. It was not on quality of life.
Right, it was on programming.
I remember what Mike Dorsey was talking about, but the most recent one was on the Red House.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Councilwoman Durbin?
Julian, do you remember how long ago that survey was? That was somewhat similar to this?
Yeah, I don't think it was exactly similar to this, but yeah, I'm remembering pre-pandemic, probably 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
And
but it was, I think, as the mayor said, it was a little more oriented towards programming preferences at the center, as opposed to general quality of life.
And the number of people participating, do we know that?
300 or 400, somewhere in that range.
And is that what we want?
I think that we would want more, as many as we can get, to respond to the survey.
My concern is that it seems like everything we do, we have a very small audience. You know, the population is in the thousands, and yet participation is in the hundreds, the low hundreds. And that's my concern with the survey. How reflective is a survey like that?
Yeah, I mean, I will share what I know. In part, it will depend upon the kind of outreach that we do and the methods that we use. The outreach that we do to inform people about it, to encourage them to participate, and the methods that we use, such as ones that the mayor has suggested, which may encourage people to respond. No way to know.
Comment.
There are best practices, yeah. Councilwoman Tyler.
We did talk about this at the CAC meeting, and Joe dedicated quite a bit of time on discussing this type of survey, and he took a survey of the people that were participating in the meeting the other night, and he and I talked about it afterwards. It's kind of a lukewarm with the CAC, and he and I talked about it as the results of it, and I think part of it is you don't avoid it just because you may not think it's good. You have to look at why we don't get responses back. And again, it goes into just what you've said, Bobby, and what you've said, Melanie, is that it's in the marketing. It's how we market this. It's how we attract the community to be a part of something and to be involved in it. I think it's a good survey, and as I said, Joe and I talked a couple of times about it since the meeting, is the approach of how we word it, we look at it. And I've also shared with Bobby, I talked with, if you are familiar with, is Seabury. Seabury is a support group that is in Montgomery County, but I worked with them a great deal in DC, and they are based in every ward in the district, and they have a specialty in doing surveys amongst aging group, the LGBT group, people who need services, what kind of event. They hit all types of surveys, and they've been in business for a long, long time. And in fact, Seabury was affiliated with the Episcopal Church for many, many years. And they have since still go on by themselves. But I've reached out to a friend of mine who is the director of the organization to understand what kind of words are the right words when you do surveys. And as Martha said, it is an art to it. I wouldn't try to say, oh yeah, I can put a survey together. No, it's an art to it, and it's an art in using the correct words to get to the end result that you're trying to capture. So I think, yes, going back to Joe at CAC to discuss some more detailed with him about it, because we did talk about it the other day.
Anything else anybody wants to mention? So,
Just
Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, you may have mentioned this, but is there a deadline or a timetable for this?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd suggest is we try and have the results back from this by December 2023 so that we can use them as part of to the extent they're useful,
Okay.
as part of the budget discussions. Yes, it is ambitious, yeah. So we had a motion to and support to discuss a quality of life survey conducted by the village. There's been some subsequent suggestions, and let me see if I have captured those and see whether the maker and the supporter of the motion will accept these amendments as part of the original motion. It is that the council and the village through the council will conduct a quality of life survey, that the results are hoped for by December 2023, that $2,000 will be made available for the potential reimbursement of expenses for the student to travel to Friendship Heights as necessary, and to promote among village residents participation in the survey, and that the quality of life survey will involve the resources of a faculty person and a student from George Washington University, and that we will consult the Community Advisory Committee and to the extent there is interest, other committees of the council as well. For example, the Communications Committee may have an interest, and the Safety Committee may have an interest, but we will explore that with those committees. Is there anything else?
Incorporated into that motion, is there the separate ad hoc committee or not?
I'm not including it. I think the suggestion
Should
that I heard...
that be a separate concept?
There wouldn't be a separate ad hoc committee. We would use the existing, use the CAC, rather than appoint another committee. So the original motion was made by Councilwoman Salt, I think, supported by Councilwoman Durbin. There have been amendments, these amendments proposed to the original motion. And let me first ask whether the amendments are acceptable to the maker and the supporter. Okay. I think it was actually Mayor White who, did you support it? Yes, thank you, sorry. Councilwoman Salt.
I just want to be clear. So input from all groups are welcome, and we're
Yes.
going to really work on a tight construction and make sure we understand what the meaning of the question is and what the answers will mean.
Yes.
We need to be very careful about
And
it and not just give this to people who don't know how to do this kind of
Right,
thing.
and I think
Okay.
part of the utility of involving the faculty person from GW and the doctoral student is to make sure that we both have a tight survey and not have a
Okay.
survey that's too long, that people
Okay.
won't respond. Are there any other comments or suggestions? Then I'll call for a vote, and let me ask Secretary Salt whether you understand the motion? Okay, great. Then I'll call for. Okay. All right. All those in favor, then please raise your hand. All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries, which moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion, a vote on the appointment to Community Advisory Committee. And let me turn that to Mayor White.
The Community Advisory Committee is one of two committees where we appoint residents to serve. And in the summer, we reappointed the committee members that you have on the paper in front of you: Joe Boucher, Cameron Moody, David Churchill, William Corey, Sheila Footer, William Lewis, Ken Niles, Ethel Pacheco, Sandra Schwartzbart, and Evan Smith. And normally the village council, at the recommendation of the mayor, appoints other residents, either those who apply or those who the council reaches out to with invitations to join the committee. We did put a notice in the, I think it was the July newsletter, asking residents if they were interested in serving on the committee to submit a letter of interest. We received no letters after that July invitation, but prior to that, we did receive a letter from Stephanie Clipper, I believe her name is, from, I believe she lives in the Carlton, along, no, 45.
Highland
40
House West.
What is this? Oh, Highland House West.
Stephanie Clipper is
Yes,
Highland House
yeah,
West.
Highland House West. And we also received a letter of interest from Al Muller, who had served on the committee as a resident. He was elected to the village council. He served as the council liaison on the committee. And then after the most recent village council election, he was not elected, so he is not formally a member of the committee. I did have requests from two of our current council members for more information about the CAC, what it does, who's on it. And I think from our conversation here tonight, you get a better idea of what types of topics the CAC gets involved with. Basically, they have an overview of the entire village that they can comment on. They do not get involved in specific programming ideas because that's Ann's committee, really looks at specific programming ideas and services that fit in with that. We can add members at any time. They generally serve a 2-year term, which corresponds with the village council election. My recommendation this evening is that we appoint Al Muller and Stephanie Clipper to the Community Advisory Committee, and we can vote on them separately. That I would make that in the form of a motion, is that we take a vote on those two members, on those two residents, I'm sorry.
So, Mayor White, the motion, your motion is to appoint both of those members to the Community Advisory Committee?
Both of those residents.
Both of those residents?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Is there support for that? Councilman Maisy supports it. Is there discussion? Councilwoman Salt.
I move to postpone the discussion and the vote on the Community Advisory Committee until October. I was one of the people that asked for more information. I feel like I need more time to understand the responsibilities of the committee. I just learned a second ago that this is one of the two committees where residents are appointed. I really want to understand the composition, whether every building's got a representative. I really want to make sure everyone feels they have an opportunity to apply. I'd like to see maybe better outreach if nobody applied from the newsletter. Really think it's important that every resident feels like they could apply and be considered, and the committee represents the entire village. Those are my thoughts.
Is that a motion
Yes,
that you're
it's
offering?
I'm offering a motion to postpone the discussion and vote on the Community Advisory Committee until October.
Is there? No, it's actually, as I understand from Roberts, it's not. The motion to postpone, in this case, is a motion to delay discussion until, in this case, a specific time. And as I understand the tabling motion occurs when there's an emergency that arises and something else needs to be considered before that. And as my past experience with this is that the tabling motion is often confused with a motion to postpone. So it's different, it's a different motion and for very different purposes. The motion is debatable, and if there is a motion and support, the discussion on the original motion discontinues, stops, and there is a discussion and then a vote to see whether the motion to postpone is adopted. So let me see, then Councilwoman Salt, was that a motion on your part?
Yes, it is a motion to postpone the discussion. I'm sorry. So you can hear me. Motion to postpone the discussion and vote on the Community Advisory Committee for just 1 month until October.
Okay, till October's meeting. Is there support for that?
Yes, October's meeting.
Councilwoman Durbin? Okay, there is a second. So now the council is considering a motion to postpone discussion on the appointment of the Community Advisory Committee until the council's October meeting. Is there discussion about that motion? Till the October meeting, sorry, thank you. Seeing Councilman Maisy.
I guess the decision has already been made, but my view is it's a silly motion. Sorry, Martha, but but we've had the Community Advisory Committee for some period of time. It's been functioning for as long as I've been on the council, and even before that. It's nothing new, and we've just delegated to this body a very important task in regard to the survey. So it's not clear what information we need at this point to inform our judgment about adding 2 new people to an existing committee.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, I'd call for the question on postponing discussion about the appointments until the October meeting. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see 4. All those opposed? 2. The motion carries 4-2. The next item on the agenda under new business is discussion vote on a proposal to retain a land use attorney. Village Manager Mansfield, I'll turn this over to you.
Since the passing of Norman Knopf, we have not effectively had a land use attorney, other than Norman's partner, Dave Brown, who was retained briefly just for the single subject of working on the 5500 Wisconsin and finishing up negotiations on that. I did receive a referral from the council chairman for Michelle Rosenfeld, who is a land use attorney who specializes in representing communities on development projects. And I had a conversation with her, and she provided some references, including the mayor of Kensington, the town of Kensington, the manager of Kensington, and the former county executive for Frederick County. And I listed those in the packet. They spoke very highly of her work, and she is very interested in working with us as needed on either the sector plan or any other land use issues that would arise. She has her proposal included in the packet. Her hourly rate is $425 an hour. She's also included a ceiling, effectively, above which we would authorize, or the council would be asked to authorize any expenses, which would conform to our bid threshold ceiling, which is about to go up to $20,000 as our charter amendment takes effect on October 1st. So in the proposed contract, any expense over $19,950 would require prior council approval in order to comport to the bid threshold ceiling.
Is there a motion to adopt this retainer agreement with Michelle Rosenfeld as described in the retainer agreement itself that the village manager has described?
So moved.
This is not a retainer, is it?
It's
We're not paying her a retainer, are we?
No, we're paying to retain her.
Retain her.
retain her. It's labeled in the packet
But
as a
she
retainer
would
agreement.
not get,
That's right.
she would not be having a retainer. We would retain her and then pay her as needed.
Good. Right.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification, Councilman Measy. Other questions? No.
Well, excuse me, just one clarification on that. There is a retainer fee of $1,500, but that's an initial payment only that then gets applied to the invoice whenever we would use her. So that's into the contract.
It's an advance payment.
An advance payment against her first invoice of $1,500. We would pay that up front. But there's nothing beyond that unless we actually use her.
So with the presentation from the village manager, let me see if there is a motion to support this and a motion for this and then a second for it.
I motion to support.
I need a motion first to make the motion to accept this agreement.
That's what I thought I did.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is there okay, is there support for that? To accept this retainer agreement that's in the packet for Michelle Rosenfeld. Michael, Councilman Measy, thank you very much. Okay, so there's been a motion and support to adopt this retainer agreement to retain her. Is there discussion, Councilwoman Durbin?
Okay, I don't know much about this attorney, but I do know that our previous attorney, Norman Knopf, was the subject of this same motion after he'd done a lot of work for us case by case. And I know that because I made the motion that we always put him on our land use issues. So what I see is that, has this woman done any work for us yet?
No, this woman has not done any work for us, and the nature of this agreement, as I understand it, would be exactly as you've described, as we have land use issues that require the expert consultation of someone with expertise in this area. Council and the village manager would have access to, in this case, Michelle Rosenfeld.
Well, when we first took Norman Knopf as our attorney, we retained him for a specific case.
Right.
And then I think there may have been more, and then we gave him this kind of agreement. I'm just saying that we knew what we were getting.
Right, thank you, Council.
So is there anything you know of now where we will be using her?
We don't have
I suspect that there may be issues related to could be Page Park, could be issues related to the Red House. There could be issues related that will arise through the urban design study, or subsequently if the county planning department seeks to move forward.
So we're not obligated to use her, I assume, past the 1,500?
No,
Okay.
we're not. It simply retains the use of her services should we need them.
I'd feel more comfortable if we were allotting the funds if we have a case of this type, rather than naming a specific attorney at this point.
Okay.
For
Thank
every
you.
time we have this case. I mean, as I said, with Norman Knopf, we hired him for one thing, and then another, and then another. Finally, I moved that we just always gave these kinds of cases to him. That's my feeling.
Thank you, Councilwoman Durbin. Is there other comments from council about this? And does everyone understand what the motion in the second was, which is to authorize this retainer agreement with Michelle Rosenfeld? Councilman Meason.
Julian, for the, I've seen it in your report, but for the benefit of our residents, could you summarize the recommendations you've gotten on this person from other municipalities for whom she's worked?
Yeah, so for the town of Kensington, she represented them in a opposition to a proposed development in the town, and she was successful, and the town was successful in defeating the proposed development that had a lot of neighborhood opposition. So both the mayor and the manager of Kensington were full of praise for her for that work. I should also mention she was the general counsel for the planning board itself. So she had a lot of experience dealing with development issues for some period of time. I don't remember the exact period of time, but she was actually the attorney representing the planning board on a wide range of land use issues.
Sounds like a thoroughly disreputable person, but I'll vote for her anyway.
Other
I'm
Councilwoman
very
Durbin.
uncomfortable discussing this in an open meeting.
Okay, thank you.
It's like, it's like hiring an employee, which we would not discuss in an open meeting.
Thank you, Councilwoman Durbin. Are there other comments? Councilwoman Tyler?
Is there a time limit on, or time frame on her proposal or her agreement?
No,
It
there's no time frame listed in her proposal.
Okay.
Not that I can see. Client has the right to terminate at any time. The attorney has the right to terminate, subject to our obligation to give the client reasonable notice to arrange alternate representation. I don't see any specific time limit in here.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any further comments? If not, I'd call for the question. All those in favor of adopting this retainer agreement, raise your hand, please. I see all those opposed. Please raise your hand. See 6-1, the motion carries, which moves us on to the last item on the agenda, which is discussion of hosting a battery recycling program at the Village Center. There's a memo in the packet about that. Let me provide some background information about it. The memo basically says that the background is that small household batteries for those in handheld and digital devices are ubiquitous. They contain hazardous materials, and they're presently difficult to recycle. And so they find their way into trash cans and landfills where they deteriorate, where they prevent recycling of rare earths and materials and release those materials into groundwater and air. If this motion is adopted, individual residents wishing to recycle their household batteries, and we're not talking car batteries and, major equipment batteries, would bring them to the would now have to bring them to the Montgomery transfer station in Shady Grove, and instead, so as not to have that burden on each resident, would be to have a village staff person have the responsibility to take the batteries that are collected to the transfer station. The recommendation is to establish this as a 2-year pilot battery recycling program. What that would mean is to place a receptacle at the front desk so that residents can drop off their household batteries. The proposal is that periodically a member of village staff would weigh the receptacle and record the weight in the log so we get some idea of the weight of material that is being dropped off, so we can understand whether this program has any use to village residents, and that we would broadly advertise through the various means we have the startup of this program so that village residents will know about it. And that information about the cumulative weight of recycled material would be shared with residents and others. Not necessarily part of the motion, but a possibility for this is that Bethesda Chevy Chase High School student volunteer seeking credit as part of the graduation requirements might be identified to write up a report about the value of the program and the extent to which pollution has been averted. But background also, this would supplement the paper shredding program that is now supported by the village. In this memo also was a suggestion to follow up on one that was made at a previous village council member, by a village resident to council, to create an ad hoc climate change or environment committee. Because of the length of this meeting, as the agenda was being considered, we'll see about adding that to the October agenda instead. So let me see whether there's a motion to establish this.
A point of order. Do we need to vote on this? I mean, is this something that requires a vote? Or can we just do it?
Well, I think that we're providing direction to the village manager to establish a new program, and this would provide that direction. And Mayor White, let me ask you whether you think, since you have the direct responsibility and regular contact with the village manager, whether you think
one of the questions I had, or a suggestion, was to ask the staff to look into whether there's any hazards to us storing a large quantity of batteries. I did some very preliminary reading on this, and I thought one article said that each battery needs to be stored separately so that they're not all rubbing against each other. And before I ask the staff to store batteries, I would like to ask them to look into whether there's any hazards to us storing those here.
Yeah. I had a question on the battery also. I mean, Lord knows I got a bunch of batteries that need to be thrown away, and I have them all stacked up next to each other. But I wanted to know, are we looking at, there's two things. One, are we looking at certain types of batteries so that if it's announced that, hey, we're now doing a battery recycle program, I don't want to see anybody's car battery come with some AA batteries.
Right.
So, and then the second thing is, if we decide to do this, as you said about the students in school and recycling, maybe we could partner with a school, because a lot of the, there's a Channel 9 that has the Eco program, and it comes on every, yes, I have a boring life, I watch the news. It's an Eco program they have weekly. On Channel 9 has a car, it's an Eco Green car, and they do special programs where we could partner with somebody that they can come pick the batteries up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
that might be another way.
Councilwoman Salt.
Two comments. At a place I used to work, they had a battery, this type of thing, and we all just put little batteries in a box right by the ATM machine, and there was no separating batteries or anything. It was just, you dump them in and somebody takes them away. But second, if we are going to do like a 2-year pilot, I think it's good to know at the beginning, what is success? You know, so you know when it's worth continuing. Just something to think through.
Okay. So I don't know that we've had a motion on this
Yeah,
yet. So-
there has, could
Yes.
I suggest that
Councilman
we
Macy.
ask Julian and Jason to investigate this, the logistics of taking care of it, what kind of instructions we might give to people, the hazardous issue that Melanie has raised, and come back with a more detailed recommendation to us for our next meeting.
I think that's,
And I would add to that really is to look at Channel 9's Echo program, because they do, that car goes around and they do sponsor these different type of landfill issues, water issues, recycling issues, and it comes on once a week, so they do have that program. So I agree with you. We could look at it to make sure we're asking for the right type of battery. And like I said, I'm not being facetious, we don't want a car battery and a AA battery together.
Or a lithium battery.
Or a lithium, right.
so let's, in light of, Councilwoman Salt?
I'm prepared to submit a motion.
I would suggest that
That we,
we
about
ask
the
the
staff.
village manager to,
That's what the motion is. I was
Okay.
just writing this down.
Bobby, do we need a motion?
I don't know, let me ask Melanie, since again, you're the one who has the direct contact with Julian on kind of task assignments and others. Do you think a motion is necessary?
I would move that the village staff look into the correct procedures for establishing a battery collection program, whether there are hazards involved, what are the best practices,
Is there
what
some-
types of batteries we're willing to collect, and
Thank
any
you.
other additional information that might be helpful for this project.
Is there support for that motion?
Second.
Okay, support from Councilman Measy. Is there further discussion about this? Then I'd call for the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I see all hands raised. All those opposed, no hands are raised. The motion carries. That
But
completes.
you voted on this one.
Sorry?
You voted.
We voted on Melanie's motion.
I know, but you voted.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm still-
Yeah, don't count my hand.
I'm
Thank you.
still sure
You're
what
right.
what the rules are.
You're right. Thank you very much. So there's, seeing no further motion, no further business for the meeting tonight, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm motion to adjourn.
Support?
Yep.
Councilman Measy, all
Yep.
those in favor?
We two are.
Raise hand, please. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.